In the vast expanse of the galactic empire, where technology has reached heights that would make gods weep with envy, where starships bend space itself, and artificial intelligence governs entire star systems, there exists a truth that the universe has forgotten. Sometimes the most profound acts of kindness come from the most unexpected places. What happens when a simple human mechanic, working in the forgotten corners of a space station, unknowingly changes the fate of an entire empire? What happens when broken toys become the bridge between species? And when the innocence of children reveals the corruption of power? This is the story of Marcus Chun, a man who believed that every broken thing deserved a chance to work again. He had no idea that his small acts of kindness would shake the very foundations of galactic civilization, or that the children whose toys he mended would one day rule the stars. In a universe where humans are considered nothing more than clever pets, one mechanic is about to prove that the heart of humanity beats stronger than any quantum engine ever built. The maintenance tunnels of Nexus Station hummed with the constant vibration of massive engines that kept the artificial world spinning through space. Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands with a worn cloth, the same motion he had performed thousands of times in his 15 years working in the forgotten corners of the galaxy's most important diplomatic hub. The smell of lubricants and heated metal filled his small workshop, a cramped space wedged between the main power conduits and the water recycling systems. Most humans on Nexus Station worked in the service sectors, cleaning the grand halls where alien diplomats made decisions that affected trillions of lives across hundreds of worlds. Marcus was different. He had carved out his own small kingdom in the mechanical bowels of the station, where broken things came to either find new life or be recycled into component parts. His workshop was a maze of salvaged equipment, half-finished projects, and tools he had either bought, traded for, or built himself. The walls were lined with shelves holding everything from quantum processors to simple mechanical gears. Marcus believed that everything deserved a chance to work again, whether it was a sophisticated navigation computer or a child's broken toy. The door to his workshop slid open with a soft hiss, letting in the brighter light from the main corridor. Marcus looked up from the damaged servo motor he had been examining to see an unusual sight. 3 children stood in his doorway, their clothes marking them as members of one of the many alien species that called the upper levels of Nexus Station home. The eldest appeared to be about 12 years old, with the distinctive blue-tinged skin and silver hair of the Kalari people. Her name was Zara, though Marcus did not know this yet. Behind her stood 2 younger children, twins who could not have been more than 8 years old. They had the same Kalari features, but their eyes held a sadness that seemed too old for their young faces. "Excuse me," Zara said in carefully practiced Standard Galactic, the trade language that allowed the hundreds of different species in the galaxy to communicate. Her accent was refined, speaking of expensive tutors and careful education. "Are you the human who fixes things?" Marcus set down his tools and smiled. In all his years on the station, he had learned that children were the same everywhere, regardless of their species. They had the same curiosity, the same capacity for joy, and the same devastating sadness when their treasured possessions broke. "I am," he replied, gesturing for them to come into the workshop. "What can I help you with?" Zara reached into a small bag she carried and pulled out what had once been a beautiful mechanical bird. Its wings were made of a material that shifted colors in the light, and its body was crafted from what appeared to be precious metals. Now, however, it lay lifeless in her hands, one wing bent at an unnatural angle, and its head hanging loose. "It was our father's," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He gave it to us before he went away. It used to sing the most beautiful songs and fly around our room. But yesterday it fell, and now it won't work anymore. One of the twins, a boy named Kai, stepped forward. His eyes were wet with tears that he was trying very hard not to let fall. Can you make it sing again? Marcus took the broken bird gently from Zara's hands, turning it over to examine the damage. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, far beyond anything he had seen in his years of working with various technologies. The materials alone were worth more than Marcus made in several years, but that was not what caught his attention. It was the love with which the bird had been made, and the love with which these children treated it. Well, Marcus said, settling into his work chair and adjusting the magnifying lens over his work surface, let's see what we can do. The children crowded around his workbench as Marcus began to carefully disassemble the bird. He worked slowly, explaining each step as he went. The twins watched with wide eyes as he showed them how the tiny gears worked together to create movement, and how the crystalline voice box produced the bird's songs. Your father must be a very talented craftsman, Marcus said as he worked. This is some of the finest mechanical work I've ever seen. Zara and her brothers exchanged a glance that Marcus did not see, focused as he was on the delicate internal mechanisms of the bird. He was very good at making beautiful things, Zara said carefully. As Marcus worked, the children began to relax. Kai and his twin sister Mira started asking questions about the various tools and gadgets that filled the workshop. Marcus found himself enjoying their curiosity, their eagerness to understand how things worked. It reminded him of his own childhood, when he would take apart every mechanical device he could get his hands on, much to his parents' dismay. The damage to the bird was more extensive than it had first appeared. The fall had not only bent the wing and loosened the head, but had also disrupted several of the delicate balance mechanisms that allowed it to fly. Marcus worked for nearly 3 hours, carefully straightening bent components, realigning connections, and testing each system as he repaired it. The children stayed the entire time, asking questions and offering to hand him tools. Marcus found their company pleasant, a welcome change from the usual solitude of his workshop. They were polite and well-educated, but there was something in their manner that suggested they were not accustomed to being around adults who treated them as equals rather than as small annoyances to be managed. Finally, Marcus made the last connection and activated the bird's power source. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the mechanical creature raised its head and looked around with bright, jewel-like eyes. Its wings spread wide, the color-shifting material catching the light and throwing rainbows across the workshop walls. The bird opened its beak and began to sing. The song was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It was not simply a recording or a programmed sequence of notes. The bird's song seemed to respond to its surroundings, incorporating the ambient sounds of the workshop into a melody that was both hauntingly beautiful and somehow alive. The children's faces lit up with joy as the bird spread its wings and took flight, circling the workshop before landing gently on Zara's outstretched hand. "How much do we owe you?" Zara asked, reaching for a small pouch that Marcus now noticed was made of material even finer than the bird itself. "Nothing," Marcus said, beginning to clean his tools. "It was my pleasure." The children stared at him in amazement. "Nothing?" Kai asked. "But you worked for hours." Marcus shrugged. "I enjoy fixing things. Besides, anything that brings that much joy when it works is worth the time it takes to repair it." Zara looked confused. "But that doesn't make sense. Everyone expects payment for their services." "Not everyone," Marcus replied. "Sometimes the payment is just knowing that something broken is working again." The children left his workshop that day with their mechanical bird singing softly on Zara's shoulder, but Marcus could sense that they would be back. There was something about them that suggested their lives contained more broken things than just toys. Over the following weeks, the three children became regular visitors to Marcus's workshop. They would arrive with various broken items, some clearly toys, others mysterious devices whose purpose Marcus could only guess at. Each time, he would repair whatever they brought without asking for payment, and each time they would watch in fascination as he worked. Gradually, Marcus began to learn more about them. They lived on one of the upper levels of the station, in quarters that they described vaguely as very large. They were tutored privately rather than attending the station schools, and they spoke several languages fluently. Most telling of all, they always arrived at his workshop accompanied by adults who waited outside in the corridor, but never came inside themselves. Marcus began to suspect that these were not ordinary children, but he did not pry. In his experience, people would tell you what they wanted you to know when they were ready. Instead, he focused on teaching them about the things he repaired for them, and found that they had a natural aptitude for understanding mechanical systems. Zara, the eldest, showed particular talent for working with delicate precision instruments. Her small fingers could manipulate tiny components that even Marcus sometimes struggled with, and she had an intuitive understanding of how complex systems fit together. The twins, Kai and Mira, were more interested in the theoretical aspects of the work, asking endless questions about why things worked the way they did and what would happen if various components were modified. One day, about a month after their first visit, the children arrived with something different. Instead of a broken toy, Mira carried what appeared to be a sophisticated communication device, its surface dark and lifeless. "This one is different," Zara said as Marcus examined the device. "It's important." Marcus could see that immediately. The device was built using technology he did not recognize, with components that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was not broken in the conventional sense, but rather seemed to have been deliberately shut down or locked. "What does it do?" Marcus asked. "It lets us talk to our father," Kai said, his young face serious. "But it stopped working yesterday, and the adults won't fix it. They say it's better if it stays broken." Marcus looked up from the device to study the three children. Their clothes, their mannerisms, their education, and now this sophisticated communication equipment painted a picture that was beginning to make sense. These were not the children of ordinary station residents. "And you want to talk to your father?" Marcus asked gently. All three children nodded emphatically. "He's been gone for a long time," Mira said. "The adults say he's very busy, but we miss him." Marcus made his decision. Whatever political implications might be involved in repairing this device, the needs of three children who missed their father outweighed any potential complications. Working on the communication device proved to be the most challenging repair Marcus had ever attempted. The technology was unlike anything in his experience, operating on principles that seemed to blend quantum mechanics with something that might have been magic if he believed in such things. He worked on it for days, with the children visiting every afternoon to check on his progress. Finally, he managed to bypass whatever had been blocking the device's function. The surface began to glow with soft, shifting patterns of light, and a series of musical tones indicated that it was attempting to establish a connection. The children gathered around as the device projected a three-dimensional image into the air above Marcus's workbench. The figure that appeared was clearly their father, sharing the same blue-tinged skin and silver hair as his children. He was middle-aged and dignified, wearing robes that suggested high rank or office. "Zara? Ki, Mira," the figure said, his voice carrying surprise and joy. "How are you managing to contact me? I was told the communication restrictions were absolute." Papa! All three children cried out simultaneously. The human mechanic fixed our communicator. The figure's eyes moved to Marcus, who was standing somewhat awkwardly behind the children. For a long moment, the two men studied each other across the impossible distance of space. "You are the mechanic who has been helping my children," the figure said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "They bring me things to fix. I fix them. And you ask for nothing in return." "No, sir. They're good kids. It's been my pleasure." The figure's expression softened. "My children have told me much about you in their letters, about your kindness, your skill, and your willingness to help without expectation of reward. This is unusual in my experience. I'm sorry if I've overstepped any boundaries," Marcus said, suddenly, worried that he might have caused problems for the children. "I didn't realize there were restrictions on their communications." "You have overstepped nothing," the figure replied firmly. "If anything, you have shown my children something that I fear they see too little of in their daily lives. Simple human decency." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with the children chattering excitedly about their lives on the station, their studies, and the various projects Marcus had been teaching them about. Throughout it all, their father listened with the patient attention of a man who genuinely loved his children and missed them deeply. Finally, the connection began to weaken, the image flickering and the audio becoming intermittent. "I must go," the figure said. "But before I do, I want you to know that you have given my children a gift beyond price. They have learned from you that kindness exists without expectation of reward, and that is a lesson that will serve them well in the years to come." The image faded, leaving Marcus and the three children standing in the sudden silence of the workshop. The children were smiling, happier than Marcus had seen them since their first visit. "Thank you," Zara said, her formal manner returning, but her eyes bright with gratitude. "This meant everything to us." As the children prepared to leave, Marcus noticed that their usual escorts were waiting outside in the corridor. But today, there were more of them, and they wore uniforms that Marcus now recognized as belonging to the Kalari Royal Guard. As understanding dawned, Marcus looked back at the three children who had been visiting his workshop for weeks. They stood in his doorway, no longer just three lonely children with broken toys, but something far more significant. "We'll see you tomorrow," Kai said cheerfully, apparently oblivious to Marcus's growing realization. "Yes," Zara agreed. "We have more things that need fixing." As they walked away, surrounded by their guards, Marcus understood that his simple acts of kindness had connected him to something much larger than he had ever imagined. The children he had been helping, the toys he had been repairing, the communication device he had restored, all of it was part of a story that was only beginning to unfold. Standing in his workshop, surrounded by the familiar chaos of broken things waiting to be made whole, Marcus Chun realized that his life was about to become far more complicated than he had ever expected. But as he thought about the joy on the children's faces when they spoke to their father, he found that he was not afraid of that complication. After all, some things were worth fixing, regardless of the consequences. The next morning brought visitors that Marcus had not expected. He was working on a damaged atmospheric recycler when his workshop door slid open to admit two figures in the elaborate robes of the Kalari Diplomatic Corps. Their faces bore the austere expressions of people accustomed to wielding authority, and their presence immediately made Marcus's cramped workshop feel even smaller. "Marcus Chun," the taller of the two said, consulting a datapad. "Human, age 43, employed in maintenance services on Nexus Station for 15 years. No criminal record, no political affiliations, no family connections of note." Marcus wiped his hands on his work cloth and turned to face his visitors. "That's me. What can I do for you?" The shorter diplomat stepped forward. You can explain how 3 children in our care managed to contact their father yesterday evening, despite explicit communication restrictions that have been in place for months. Understanding settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. The communication device he had repaired had been deliberately disabled, not accidentally broken. Someone had wanted to prevent those children from speaking to their father, and Marcus had unknowingly interfered with that plan. They told me their communicator was broken, Marcus said carefully. They asked me to fix it. I fixed it. Did you not think to question why 3 children of obvious privilege would bring such a device to a maintenance worker rather than to the station's technical services? The taller diplomat asked. Marcus shrugged. Kids bring me broken things all the time. I fix them. That's what I do. The 2 diplomats exchanged glances. Mr. Chun, the shorter one, said, "Do you have any idea who those children are?" "I'm starting to get a picture," Marcus replied, "though I get the feeling you're about to fill in the details. Those children are Zara, Kai, and Mira Velthorin, direct heirs to the Kalari throne. Their father is crowned Prince Aldrich Velthorin, who has been imprisoned on charges of treason against the Kalari Empire. The communication restrictions were put in place by order of the Regent Council to prevent the prince from influencing his children during his trial." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had stumbled into the middle of a political situation that was far beyond his understanding, let alone his ability to navigate. "I see," he said quietly. "Do you?" the taller diplomat asked sharply. "Do you understand that by enabling contact between the prince and his children, you may have compromised an ongoing investigation into activities that could destabilize the entire Kalari government? I understand that 3 kids missed their father and wanted to talk to him," Marcus replied, his own voice taking on an edge. "Everything else is politics, and I don't do politics." The shorter diplomat stepped closer. "Mr. Chun, you may not do politics, but politics has now been done to you. The question is how we proceed from here." Marcus could see several possibilities, none of them appealing. He could be arrested as a co-conspirator, banned from the station, or worse. But as he considered these options, he found that his primary concern was not for his own safety, but for the 3 children who had trusted him with their broken things. "What's going to happen to the kids?" he asked. The diplomats seemed surprised by the question. "That is not your concern," the taller one said. "I'm making it my concern," Marcus replied firmly. "They're good kids. Whatever their father may or may not have done, they don't deserve to be caught in the middle of it. Their father attempted to overthrow the legitimate government of the Kalari Empire," the shorter diplomat said coldly. "He sought to dissolve the Regent Council and assume absolute power. The children's situation is unfortunate, but it is a consequence of their father's actions, not ours." Marcus studied the 2 diplomats, noting the careful way they phrased their accusations and the practiced manner in which they delivered them. In his years on Nexus Station, he had learned to recognize the difference between truth and official truth, and these men were clearly dispensing the latter. "And you believe that?" Marcus asked. "What we believe is irrelevant," the taller diplomat replied. "What matters is the stability of the Kalari government and the maintenance of order." "Right," Marcus said. "Well, then, I guess my question is simple. Are you planning to arrest me? Or are you planning to let me continue fixing broken things for whoever brings them to me?" The 2 diplomats conferred quietly for a moment before the shorter one addressed Marcus again. "Mr. Chun, you are not under arrest. However, we strongly advise you to avoid any further involvement with the Velthorn children. Their situation is delicate, and interference from outsiders, however well-intentioned, can only make things worse." "I'll keep that in mind," Marcus said neutrally. After the diplomats left, Marcus tried to return to his work, but found himself unable to concentrate. The atmospheric recycler sat forgotten on his workbench as he considered what he had learned. 3 children, far from home, cut off from their father who might or might not be guilty of the crimes he was accused of, surrounded by adults who saw them as political assets rather than as people. When Zara, Kai, and Mira arrived that afternoon, they seemed subdued. Their usual chatter was replaced by a careful politeness that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of the diplomatic visitors he had received that morning. "We brought you something to fix," Zara said formally, producing a small device that Marcus recognized as a personal entertainment unit. The screen was cracked, but it was clearly a simple repair that the station's technical services could have handled easily. Marcus took the device and examined it carefully. "This is a pretty straightforward fix," he said. "Shouldn't take more than a few minutes." The children nodded, but said nothing more. They watched as Marcus worked, but without their usual curiosity and questions. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Marcus finally set down his tools and looked at them directly. "Somebody talked to you about coming here, didn't they?" he said gently. Zara's composure cracked slightly. "They said we were putting you in danger by bringing our problems to you. They said we were being selfish. They said a lot of things," Kai added, his young face troubled. Marcus finished the repair and handed the device back to Zara. "And what do you think?" "I think adults make everything complicated," Mira said with the devastating honesty that only children possessed. Marcus laughed despite the tension of the situation. "You know what? You're absolutely right about that." He gestured for the children to come closer to his workbench. "Here's the thing about adults," he said, keeping his voice low. "We like to think we know what's best for everyone, especially kids. But sometimes we get so caught up in the big picture that we forget about the little things that actually matter." "Like talking to our father?" Kai asked. "Like talking to your father," Marcus agreed. "Now, I don't know anything about the politics of your situation. I don't know if your father is guilty of what they say he's done, and honestly, that's not my business. But I do know that you love him and that he loves you, and that's not political. That's just human." "We're not human," Zara pointed out. "No, but you're people," Marcus replied. "And people need connection. They need to know that someone cares about them for who they are, not for what they represent or what they can do for others." The children considered this carefully. "The adults say that our needs have to come second to the good of the empire," Zara said slowly. Marcus felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "And I say that any empire that can't find room for the needs of children isn't much of an empire at all." Over the following weeks, the children continued to visit Marcus's workshop, but the nature of their visits changed. Instead of bringing broken toys and devices, they began to bring questions. Questions about right and wrong, about duty and desire, about the difference between what adults said was necessary and what felt true in their hearts. Marcus found himself in the strange position of becoming not just a repairman, but a teacher and confidant. He shared with them the lessons he had learned in his years of fixing things. That broken didn't mean worthless, that sometimes the most important repairs were the ones that couldn't be seen, and that the act of caring for something was often more valuable than the thing itself. One day, Mira brought him a philosophical puzzle that had been troubling her. "Uncle Vex says that our father chose his own path when he decided to challenge the Regent Council, and that we have to live with the consequences of his choices. But we didn't choose anything. Why should we have to live with consequences that aren't ours?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "That's a really good question, Mira. And I think the answer is that you don't have to live with those consequences forever. Right now, you're children, and children don't have a lot of control over their situations. But someday you'll be adults, and then you'll get to choose your own path. But what if by then the damage is done? Kai asked, what if we've been shaped by all of this in ways we can't undo? Then you'll do what people have always done when faced with that situation, Marcus replied. You'll decide what kind of people you want to be, and you'll work to become those people regardless of what happened to you before. These conversations became a regular part of the children's visits. Marcus began to understand that what they needed from him was not just mechanical repairs, but a different perspective on their lives and circumstances. They were surrounded by adults who saw them as symbols and chess pieces in political games, but Marcus saw them as individuals with their own thoughts, feelings, and potential. The breakthrough came about 2 months after the diplomatic visit, when Zara arrived at Marcus's workshop alone. She was agitated and upset, clearly struggling with something that was troubling her deeply. I need to ask you something, she said without preamble. And I need you to tell me the truth, even if you think it will upset me. Marcus set down his tools and gave her his full attention. All right, do you think our father is guilty? She asked. Do you think he really tried to overthrow the government? Marcus had been dreading this question since the day the diplomats visited him. He knew that his answer would matter enormously to this young girl who was struggling to understand a situation that even adults found complex and morally ambiguous. I don't know, he said honestly. I've never met your father except through that communication device. I don't know what he was accused of doing or what evidence exists against him. But I can tell you what I do know. Zara leaned forward, hanging on his every word. I know that he loves you and your brothers more than anything in the world. I could see that in the way he looked at you, in the way he listened to everything you said. I know that you love him and that you believe he's a good person. And I know that sometimes good people end up in bad situations because they're trying to do what they think is right. But what if what he thought was right was actually wrong? Zara asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. Marcus considered this carefully. Then he'll face the consequences of that, and he'll have to live with them. But that doesn't change the fact that he's your father and he loves you. People aren't just their best moments or their worst moments. They're the sum of everything they've done and everyone they've touched along the way. Zara was quiet for a long moment. The Regent Council says he's a traitor. Uncle Vex says he's a fool who let his emotions cloud his judgment. But when we talked to him, he seemed like just our father. Maybe that's because that's exactly what he is, Marcus suggested. Maybe all the other stuff, the politics and the accusations and the trials, maybe that's just noise. Maybe the only thing that really matters is the relationship between a father and his children. That evening, Marcus received another visitor. This time it was not a diplomat, but a single Kalari woman in the plain clothes of a station worker. She was older than the diplomats had been, with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded Marcus of the children. Mr. Chun, she said, my name is Dr. Senna Velmoraine. I am the personal physician to the Vel Thorin children. Marcus invited her into his workshop, offering her the only chair while he leaned against his workbench. What can I do for you, doctor? You can continue doing exactly what you have been doing, she said simply. You can continue treating those children as people rather than as political symbols. Marcus studied her carefully. I take it you don't agree with how they're being handled. Dr. Vel Moraine sighed deeply. Mr. Chun, I have been caring for royal children for more than 30 years. I have seen them raised to be rulers, diplomats, warriors, and scholars. But I have never seen 3 children as isolated and emotionally starved as Zara, Kai, and Mira. They seem like good kids to me. They are extraordinary children, the doctor agreed. They are intelligent, compassionate, and remarkably resilient given what they have endured. But they're also profoundly lonely. Until they began visiting you, I was genuinely concerned about their psychological development. Marcus felt a weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Doctor, I'm just a mechanic. I fix broken things. I'm not qualified to help with the kind of problems these kids are facing. Mr. Chun, Dr. Velmoraine said gently, you have been treating them like normal children who happen to have unusual circumstances, rather than like unusual children who need to be managed and controlled. You have given them the one thing that no amount of wealth or privilege can provide, the experience of being valued for who they are rather than for what they represent. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small communication device, similar to the one Marcus had repaired months earlier. The children asked me to give this to you. It's a private channel that bypasses the official communication restrictions. If they ever need help, if their situation becomes dangerous, use it to contact me. Marcus took the device, feeling its weight both physical and metaphorical. You think their situation might become dangerous? The political climate on Kalari is becoming increasingly unstable, Dr. Velmoraine said carefully. The Regent Council's hold on power is not as secure as they would like people to believe, and there are those who see the Velthorin children as either assets to be exploited or threats to be eliminated. The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. You're talking about children. I'm talking about the heirs to a throne, the doctor replied sadly. In politics, the distinction is not always as clear as we might wish. After Dr. Velmoraine left, Marcus sat alone in his workshop, staring at the communication device she had given him. He thought about 3 children who had wandered into his life with broken toys and simple requests for help, and how that simple beginning had led him to this moment of terrible responsibility. He thought about Zara's serious questions about her father's guilt or innocence, about Kai and Myra's struggles to understand why they were being punished for things they had not done, about the way all 3 children lit up when they were allowed to be nothing more than curious kids learning about how mechanical things worked. Marcus Chun had always believed that his role in the universe was simple. He fixed broken things. But as he considered the device in his hands and the trust that 3 royal children had placed in him, he began to understand that sometimes the most important things that needed fixing were not mechanical at all. Outside his workshop, the great engines of Nexus Station continued their eternal hum, keeping the artificial world spinning through space. But inside, in the small corner that Marcus had claimed as his own, the foundations of something much larger were being laid. Something that would eventually change not just the fate of 3 children, but the destiny of an entire empire. The emergency alert came at 3 in the morning, cutting through Marcus's sleep like a blade. The communication device DR. Velmoraine had given him pulsed with urgent red light, and when he activated it, her voice emerged tense with fear and urgency. Marcus, are you there? Please respond immediately. Marcus sat up in his narrow bunk, instantly awake. I'm here. What's wrong? The children are in danger. The Regent Council has issued a decree declaring Crown Prince Aldrich guilty of high treason. His execution is scheduled for tomorrow at dawn, and there are credible rumors that the children will be declared complicit in his crimes and taken into permanent custody. The words hit Marcus like ice water. Complicit? They're children. In Kalari law, children of traitors can be held responsible for their parents' actions if they are deemed old enough to understand the implications, Dr. Velmoraine explained rapidly. Zara is 12, which makes her legally culpable under emergency provisions. The twins are technically too young, but the council has been known to make exceptions when it serves their purposes. Marcus was already reaching for his clothes. Where are they now? Still in their quarters, but under heavy guard. I've been told that transport will arrive at dawn to take them to a secure facility on Kalari Prime. Once they're there, her voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. What do you need me to do? Can you get a maintenance shaft 77 Alpha? It connects directly to the residential levels where the children are being held. Marcus checked his chronometer. I could be there in 20 minutes. Bring whatever tools you need to override security locks. And, Marcus, once we do this, there's no going back. We'll all be fugitives. Marcus was already moving, grabbing his toolkit, and the few possessions that really mattered to him. Those kids didn't choose any of this, he said. If their own government won't protect them, then somebody else has to. Maintenance Shaft 77 Alpha was a cramped conduit that ran behind the walls of Nexus Station's most exclusive residential district. Marcus had worked in these tunnels before, maintaining the environmental systems that kept the diplomatic quarters comfortable, but tonight the familiar space felt alien and threatening. Dr. Velmoraine was waiting for him, along with two other figures Marcus didn't recognize. One was a young Kalari woman in the uniform of the Royal Guard, and the other was an older human man wearing the simple clothes of a station worker. Marcus, Dr. Velmoraine said quietly, "This is Captain Lisa Velkane of the Royal Guard, and Thomas Wright from Station Security. They've both volunteered to help." Captain Velkane stepped forward. "Mr. Chun, I want you to understand what we're asking of you. If we're caught, we'll face charges of kidnapping, treason, and conspiracy against the Kalari government. They could execute all of us." Marcus looked at each of them in turn, seeing the fear and determination in their faces. "And if we don't act, then 3 innocent children disappear into the Kalari prison system, and we never see them again," Thomas said grimly. "I've got kids of my own. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to help." Dr. Velmoraine pulled out a schematic of the residential level. "The children are in Suite 47. There's 6 guards stationed outside, and the electronic locks have been reinforced. Thomas has arranged a distraction that should draw most of the guard away, but we'll still have to move quickly." Marcus studied the schematic, tracing the route from the maintenance access to the children's quarters. "How are we getting them off the station? Even if we reach them, there's no way we can just walk out through the main airlocks." Captain Velkane smiled grimly. "I have a ship. It's small, but it's fast, and it's equipped with military-grade stealth systems. If we can get the children to docking Bay 12 without being detected, I can get them away from here." "And then what?" Marcus asked. "Where can they go that the Kalari government won't find them?" The group exchanged glances. Finally, Dr. Velmoraine spoke. "There are places, worlds beyond the reach of the major galactic powers, colonies that value independence more than political alliances. It won't be an easy life for them, but it will be a free one." Marcus nodded slowly. The plan was desperate and dangerous, with a dozen points where it could go catastrophically wrong. But as he thought about Zara's serious questions, Kai's tears over his broken bird, and Myra's innocent wisdom about adults making everything complicated, he knew they had no choice. "All right," he said, "let's go get some kids." Thomas Wright's distraction was elegantly simple. As the head of the maintenance crew that kept the residential district's systems running, he had access to the environmental controls. At exactly 4:30 in the morning, he triggered a cascading failure in the air recycling system that sent 4 of the 6 guards rushing to investigate reports of toxic gas leaks 3 levels down. The remaining 2 guards were dealt with by Captain Velkane, who simply walked up to them in her Royal Guard uniform and ordered them to report to the emergency response team. Her authority was unquestioned, and within minutes the corridor outside the children's quarters was empty. Marcus made quick work of the electronic lock, his years of experience with station systems serving him well. The door slid open silently, revealing a spacious suite decorated in the austere elegance favored by Kalari nobility. But Marcus's attention was immediately drawn to three small figures huddled together on a couch in the main room. Zara, Kai, and Mira looked up as the adults entered, their faces showing a mixture of hope and fear. They were still in their night clothes, but they had clearly been awake and waiting. "Marcus!" Mira exclaimed, jumping up and running to him. "We knew you would come. Dr. Senna told us you were going to help us," Kai added, his young face serious. "Are we really in danger?" Zara stood more slowly, her 12-year-old maturity making her grasp the gravity of their situation more completely than her younger siblings. "They're going to kill our father, aren't they?" she said quietly. Dr. Velmoraine knelt down to bring herself to eye level with the children. "Yes, dear one. I'm sorry, but we're not going to let them hurt you." "What about Papa?" Mira asked, her voice small and frightened. Marcus felt his heart break a little as he looked at the three children whose world was collapsing around them. "I don't know if we can help your father," he said honestly, "but we can make sure you're safe." "We can't leave him," Zara said firmly. "If they're going to kill him, we have to try to save him." "Captain Vel," Kane shook her head. "Zara, your father is being held in the maximum security detention center. There's no way to reach him without a full military assault. And even then, the chances of success would be minimal." "Then we have to try," Kai said, his young voice fierce with determination. Marcus looked at the three children, seeing their father's courage and determination reflected in their faces. These were not ordinary children, he realized. They were the heirs to a throne, raised from birth to understand duty and responsibility. They would not abandon their father, even if staying meant their own deaths. "There might be another way," Thomas said slowly. "The detention center's security is controlled from the main station network. If someone could access the central computer core." "Captain Vel," Kane stared at him. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that the same maintenance access that got us here could get us to the computer core," Thomas replied. "And that Marcus here is probably the only person on this station who could navigate those tunnels in the dark and under pressure." Marcus understood immediately. They weren't just talking about rescuing the children anymore. They were talking about a full-scale jailbreak that would pit them against the entire security apparatus of Nexus Station. "The risks," Dr. Velmoraine began, "are the same whether we take one person or four," Marcus interrupted. "If we're caught, we're all dead anyway. Might as well be dead for something worthwhile." Zara stepped forward and took Marcus's hand. "You would do that? You would risk your life to save our father?" Marcus looked down at the serious young girl who had first walked into his workshop with a broken mechanical bird. "Zara, your father is the most important person in the world to you and your brothers. If there's any chance we can save him, we have to try." The revised plan was insane in its complexity and audacity. While Captain Vel Kane and Dr. Velmoraine took the children to the docking bay and prepared for immediate departure, Marcus and Thomas would make their way to the central computer core. Marcus would override the detention center security systems, while Thomas handled any physical obstacles they encountered. They would have exactly 1 hour before the morning shift change would expose Thomas's sabotage of the environmental systems. After that, the station would be in full lockdown mode, and escape would become impossible. The journey through the maintenance tunnels to the computer core was a nightmare of cramped spaces, live electrical conduits, and security sensors that had to be bypassed without triggering alarms. Marcus had worked in these tunnels for 15 years, but never under conditions like this. Every sound seemed amplified, Every shadow could hide a security patrol, and the constant awareness that 3 children's lives depended on his success made his hands shake as he worked. The central computer core was a massive chamber filled with quantum processing units that hummed with barely contained energy. The security console was protected by multiple layers of encryption and physical barriers, but Marcus had one advantage that the system designers had not anticipated: his deep understanding of how the station's maintenance systems interconnected with the security grid. Instead of trying to break through the security directly, Marcus accessed the environmental controls and began systematically shutting down the life support systems in the detention center. As alarms began to sound and emergency protocols activated, the detention center's security doors automatically unlocked to allow for emergency evacuation. "Brilliant," Thomas breathed, watching the security monitors as confusion erupted throughout the detention center. "They'll have to evacuate the entire facility." Marcus was already working on the next phase, accessing the prisoner transport logs to determine exactly where Crown Prince Aldrich was being held. "Level 7, cell block Delta," he reported. "But we got about 10 minutes before they realize this isn't a real emergency." "Then we better move fast," Thomas said, leading the way out of the computer core and toward the detention center. The detention center was in chaos when they arrived. Guards were evacuating prisoners in accordance with emergency protocols, and, in the confusion, 2 maintenance workers with proper identification badges attracted no attention. Marcus and Thomas made their way through the corridors, following the signs towards cell block Delta. They found Crown Prince Aldrich exactly where the computer said he would be, sitting calmly in his cell despite the alarms and flashing emergency lights. He was older than he had appeared in the holographic communication, with the weight of imprisonment and worry evident in his face, but his eyes held the same intelligent kindness that Marcus recognized in his children. "Prince Aldrich," Marcus said, working quickly on the cell's electronic lock. "We're here to get you out." The prince looked up in surprise. "You're the mechanic, the one who helped my children." "That's right. And right now, your children are waiting for you on a ship that could take all of you somewhere safe." The lock disengaged with a soft click, and the cell door swung open. Crown Prince Aldrich stood slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. "How did you—" "Long story," Thomas interrupted. "Right now we need to move. This place is going to be swarming with real security in about 5 minutes." They made their way back through the detention center, blending with the crowd of evacuated prisoners and guards. The emergency protocols that Marcus had triggered were working exactly as designed, creating enough confusion to mask their movements. But as they reached the main corridor that led back to the maintenance tunnels, Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold. "Emergency lockdown initiated. All personnel remain in current locations." "Repeat, emergency lockdown initiated." The lights in the corridor shifted from emergency amber to the harsh red of security alert, and blast doors began sealing throughout the station. They had been discovered, and now they were trapped. "This way," Thomas shouted, leading them toward a service hatch that provided access to the outer hull maintenance areas. "If we can reach the external docking ports." They ran through corridors that were rapidly filling with security personnel, Marcus's knowledge of the station's layout allowing them to stay one step ahead of the search teams. But as they approached the docking bay, where Captain Vel Kane's ship was waiting, they encountered a problem they had not anticipated. A full squad of Kalari Royal Guards blocked the entrance to the docking bay, their weapons drawn and their faces grim. At their head stood a figure that made Crown Prince Aldrich stop in his tracks. "Hello, brother," said Prince Vex Velthorin, the children's uncle and the current head of the Regent Council. I was wondering when you would show yourself. Marcus felt the weight of defeat settling over him as he realized that they had been betrayed. Somehow, Prince Vex had learned of their plan and had been waiting for them. Behind the guards, Marcus could see Captain Velkane's ship, but there was no sign of the captain or the children. "Where are my children, Vex?" Crown Prince Aldrich asked, his voice steady despite the desperate circumstances. Prince Vex smiled coldly. "Safe. For now. Their fate depends entirely on your cooperation. What do you want?" "I want you to publicly confess to your crimes against the Kalari Empire. I want you to renounce any claim to the throne and acknowledge the legitimacy of the Regent Council's rule. And I want you to do it knowing that your children's lives hang in the balance." Crown Prince Aldrich looked at Marcus and Thomas, both of whom had risked everything to help him, and then back at his brother. "And if I refuse, then your children will share your fate. All 4 of you will be executed as traitors, and the threat to the council's power will be ended forever." Marcus watched the exchange with growing anger. He had always avoided politics, focusing instead on the simple clarity of mechanical problems that could be solved with skill and persistence. But standing in that corridor, watching Prince Vex use children as bargaining chips in his power games, Marcus understood that some problems couldn't be solved by staying neutral. "There's a third option," Marcus said, stepping forward. Prince Vex looked at him with contempt. "You are a maintenance worker, human. You have no options." Marcus smiled grimly. "That's where you're wrong. See, I've spent 15 years learning everything there is to know about this station, including the emergency systems." He pulled out a small device from his tool kit, one that he had built himself years ago for routine maintenance tasks. But with a few quick modifications, it could serve a very different purpose. This station has emergency protocols designed to protect diplomatic personnel in case of catastrophic system failure. Marcus explained. If the station's main power grid goes down, all security systems automatically divert to life support, and the emergency evacuation procedures override everything else. Prince Vex's expression shifted from contempt to alarm. "You wouldn't dare. You'd be killing thousands of people." "No, Marcus replied calmly. "I'd be creating a massive distraction that would force you to choose between maintaining control and saving lives. And I know which one the children's father would choose." Crown Prince Aldrich stepped up beside Marcus, understanding immediately what the human was offering. "My brother has always cared more about power than about people," he said quietly. "But even he wouldn't let thousands die just to maintain his political position." "You're bluffing," Prince Vex said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Marcus activated the device in his hands. Throughout the station, lights began to flicker as power fluctuations cascaded through the main grid. Emergency alarms started sounding, and the blast doors that had sealed them and began cycling open and closed as the security systems tried to balance emergency protocols with lockdown procedures. "Emergency evacuation procedures now active," the station's computer announced. "All personnel proceed to designated evacuation points immediately." In the chaos that followed, Captain Velkane's ship suddenly powered up and burst out of the docking bay, its weapons firing at the royal guards who had been blocking the entrance. As the guards scattered to avoid the unexpected attack, 3 small figures could be seen in the ship's cockpit. Zara, Kai, and Mira had not waited to be rescued. They had rescued themselves. Crown Prince Aldrich ran toward the ship as it hovered just outside the docking bay, its rear hatch open and waiting. Marcus and Thomas followed, but as they reached the entrance, Prince Vex's voice rang out behind them. "This isn't over, Aldrich. The council will never stop hunting you." Crown Prince Aldrich paused at the threshold of the ship and looked back at his brother. "Then, you'll have to catch us first," he said. And with that, he stepped aboard the ship that would carry him and his children to freedom. As the ship pulled away from Nexus Station and jumped to hyperspace, Marcus found himself sitting in the passenger compartment with 3 children who had risked everything to save their father, just as he had risked everything to save them. "Thank you," Zara said simply, taking his hand. "For everything." Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him, people who had become his family through shared danger and mutual trust, and realized that his life as a simple maintenance worker was truly over. Whatever came next, it would be far more complicated than fixing broken toys in a cramped workshop. But as he watched the stars streak past through the ship's viewport, Marcus found that he was not afraid of that complication. After all, some things were worth fixing, regardless of the cost. The independent colony of Haven's Rest had been built by refugees from a dozen different worlds, people who had fled war, persecution, or simply the suffocating bureaucracy of the major galactic powers. It was a rough, frontier world where survival depended more on practical skills than on political connections, and where a person's past mattered less than their willingness to work for the common good. For Marcus Chun, it was exactly the kind of place he had never imagined living. The small cottage that had been assigned to their group sat on the outskirts of the main settlement, surrounded by the alien trees that gave Haven's Rest its distinctive purple and gold landscape. It was a far cry from the sterile corridors of Nexus Station, but as Marcus worked in the garden that Dr. Velmoraine had insisted on planting, he found that he was beginning to appreciate the change. 3 months had passed since their escape from Kalari space, and they were all still adjusting to their new lives. Crown Prince Aldrich, no longer a prince, but simply Aldrich Velthorin, had thrown himself into learning the agricultural techniques that kept the colony fed. Dr. Velmoraine had established a small medical clinic that served the outlying farms. Captain Velkane had joined the colony's defense force, her military skills invaluable in protecting against the raiders that occasionally threatened the settlement. And Marcus had returned to what he did best, fixing things. The workshop that the colony had provided him was larger than his old space on Nexus Station, with better lighting and more modern equipment. But more importantly, it served a community that genuinely needed his skills. When the atmospheric processors broke down, Marcus was there to repair them. When the communication arrays failed during the frequent electromagnetic storms that swept across Haven's Rest, Marcus worked through the night to restore contact with the outside world. The children had adapted to their new life with the remarkable resilience of youth. Zara had taken over much of the colony's computer systems, her natural talent for precision work translating perfectly to programming and network maintenance. The twins had discovered a love for the colony's educational programs, where they could ask all the questions they wanted without being told that royal children shouldn't display such curiosity. But Marcus could see that their father was struggling. Aldrich Velthorin had been raised from birth to rule an empire spanning dozens of star systems. Every aspect of his education and experience had prepared him for a life of immense responsibility and authority. Now, he spent his days learning to operate irrigation systems and tend to crops, useful work that nonetheless left him feeling adrift and purposeless. The breaking point came on a quiet evening when Marcus found Aldrich sitting alone in the cottage's main room, staring out at the alien sunset with an expression of profound melancholy. "Regrets?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair beside him. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I keep thinking about all the people I left behind, the ones who supported me, who believed in the changes I wanted to make. What's happening to them now that I'm gone?" Marcus had wondered the same thing. The few news reports they had been able to access suggested that Prince Vex's Regent Council had consolidated its power completely after their escape. Political opponents were being arrested on charges of treason, and the military was being restructured to ensure absolute loyalty to the new regime. "You think you should have stayed and fought?" Marcus said. "It wasn't a question. I think I took the coward's way out," Aldrich replied bitterly. "I ran to save my children, and in doing so, I abandoned everyone else who was counting on me." Marcus considered this carefully. In the months since their escape, he had learned more about the political situation that had led to Aldrich's imprisonment. The Crown Prince had not been attempting a coup, as his brother had claimed. Instead, he had been working to implement democratic reforms that would have limited the power of the noble houses and given ordinary citizens a voice in their government. Prince Vex and the Regent Council had seen these reforms as a threat to their authority and had moved to eliminate Aldrich before he could implement them. The treason charges had been fabricated, but in the Byzantine politics of the Kalari Empire, the truth mattered less than the perception of legitimacy. "Aldrich," Marcus said finally, "let me ask you something. If you had stayed and fought, what would have happened to your children?" "They would have been executed along with me," Aldrich admitted. "And your reform movement? How much would it have accomplished with its leader dead and his supporters scattered or imprisoned?" "It would have died with me," Aldrich said quietly. Marcus nodded. "So by leaving, you saved your children's lives and preserved the possibility that your ideas might someday be implemented. That doesn't sound like cowardice to me. That sounds like strategic thinking. But what's the point of preserving ideas if there's no way to act on them?" Aldrich asked. "I'm an exile on a frontier world with no resources, no allies, and no way to influence events back home. My ideas might as well be dead." Before Marcus could respond, Zara's voice called from the doorway. "Papa, you have a visitor." Aldrich and Marcus turned to see a figure standing in the cottage's entrance, silhouetted against the purple twilight outside. As the figure stepped into the light, Marcus recognized the distinctive features of a Kalari noble, but this was not someone from their original group. "Lord Commander Thessa Vel Karim," Aldrich said, rising from his chair with surprise. "How did you find us?" The newcomer was a middle-aged Kalari woman with the bearing of a career military officer. Her clothes were simple and practical, but Marcus could see the subtle signs of quality that marked her as someone of importance. More significantly, she wore the insignia of the Kalari Royal Navy. "Your Highness," she said, offering a formal bow, "I've been searching for you for 3 months. There are things you need to know about the situation back home." Aldrich gestured for her to sit, and Marcus rose to leave them privacy for what was clearly going to be a political discussion. But Lord Commander Vel Karim stopped him. "Mr. Chun, please stay. Your role in His Highness's rescue has made you a person of considerable interest to many factions within the Empire." Marcus settled back into his chair, wondering what new complications were about to enter his life. "What's happened?" "Prince Vex's consolidation of power has not gone as smoothly as he had hoped," Lord Commander Vel Karim explained. "The military is divided between those who support his regime and those who remember their oath to the legitimate royal line. Several of the outer systems have declared independence rather than submit to the Regent Council's authority. And there have been incidents." "What kind of incidents?" Aldrich asked carefully. "Mass demonstrations on Kalari Prime. Work stoppages on the industrial worlds. 3 separate assassination attempts against members of the Regent Council. Your brother's response has been to declare martial law and begin systematic repression of anyone suspected of disloyalty." Aldrich closed his eyes, clearly pained by what he was hearing. "How many dead?" "Thousands," Lord Commander Vel Karim said quietly. "And the number grows daily. The empire is tearing itself apart. The room fell silent as the implications of her words settled over them. Marcus could see the conflict playing out on Aldrich's face as he wrestled with the knowledge that his exile had not brought peace to his people, but had instead led to even greater suffering. "What do you want from me?" Aldrich asked finally. Lord Commander Velkarim reached into her bag and pulled out a device that Marcus immediately recognized as a military communication unit. The loyal factions of the Navy and Army have been coordinating with sympathetic governors and local leaders across the empire. We have established a shadow government in exile, and we want you to lead it. A shadow government, a legitimate alternative to the Regent Council, based on your rightful claim to the throne and dedicated to implementing the democratic reforms that led to your original conflict with Prince Vex. We have ships, troops, and the support of nearly a third of the Empire's population. What we lack is a leader with the moral authority to unite all the disparate factions. Aldrich looked at his children, who had gathered in the doorway to listen to the conversation. Zara's face was serious and thoughtful, while the twins looked confused by the adult complexities they were witnessing. "You're asking me to lead a civil war," Aldrich said. "I'm asking you to lead a revolution," Lord Commander Velkarim corrected. "The civil war has already begun. Prince Vex started at the moment he decided to seize power illegally. The question is whether it will be led by someone committed to justice and democracy, or whether it will devolve into chaos and bloodshed." Marcus watched the exchange with growing uneasiness. He had hoped that their escape to Haven's Rest would mark the end of their involvement in Kalari politics, but it seemed that the conflict they had fled was following them even here. "What would this shadow government look like?" Zara asked, stepping into the room with the confidence of someone who had been raised to understand political implications. Lord Commander Velkarim smiled at the young girl's directness. "It would operate from secure bases in the independent systems, coordinating resistance activities within the Empire while working to establish an alternative power structure. The goal would be to present the Kalari people with a clear choice between the Regent Council's tyranny and a legitimate government committed to reform. And how long would this shadow government need to operate before it could challenge the Regent Council directly?" Aldrich asked. "That depends on many factors," Lord Commander Velkarim admitted. "The loyalty of the military, the level of popular support, the response of the other galactic powers. But I would estimate between 2 and 5 years before we would be in a position to launch a direct assault on Kalari Prime." 2 to 5 years of war, Marcus thought. 2 to 5 years of children growing up in refugee camps, families torn apart by conflicting loyalties, and young people dying in battles over political ideologies they might not even understand. "There's another option," Marcus said suddenly. Both Kalari nobles looked at him with surprise. "Mr. Chun," Lord Commander Velkarim said politely. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful landscape of Haven's Rest. "What if instead of fighting a civil war, you simply offered people a better alternative?" "I don't understand," Aldrich said. Marcus turned back to face the room. "Haven's Rest works. It's a functioning society based on cooperation, mutual aid, and democratic decision-making. People here are free to pursue their own lives without interference from corrupt nobles or power-hungry politicians. What if you took that model and offered it to other worlds?" "You're suggesting we abandon the idea of retaking the Empire?" Lord Commander Velkarim asked, clearly skeptical. "I'm suggesting you build something better than an empire," Marcus replied. "A confederation of free worlds, voluntarily associated for mutual benefit and protection. No hereditary nobles, no regent councils, No single point of failure that could be corrupted by ambitious politicians. Aldrich stared at Marcus as if he had never seen him before. You're talking about abandoning thousands of years of Kalari tradition. I'm talking about learning from what works, Marcus said. The Kalari Empire is dying, Aldrich. It's been dying for decades, maybe centuries. All this civil war will do is determine who gets to rule over the corpse. But if you could show people a living alternative, they might choose freedom over slavery, Zara said quietly, finishing Marcus's thought. For the next several hours, they talked through the implications and possibilities of Marcus's suggestion. Lord Commander Velkarim was initially resistant. Her military mindset focused on the direct approach of removing Prince Vex from power through force. But as they explored the alternatives, even she began to see the appeal of a solution that offered hope rather than just another change of rulers. The key insight came from Dr. Vel Moraine, who had joined the discussion after finishing her evening rounds at the clinic. The problem with revolutions, she said, is that they're about tearing down the old system. But people need something to believe in, not just something to fight against. A positive vision, Aldrich mused. A demonstration that there's a better way to live. Exactly, Marcus said. Haven's Rest is just one world, but there are dozens of independent colonies scattered throughout this region of space. If they could be brought together into a voluntary confederation, if people could see that it was possible to live without kings and nobles and regent councils, it would spread, Zara said, her eyes bright with understanding. People on Empire worlds would start asking why they couldn't have the same freedoms. Lord Commander Velkarim nodded slowly, and when the time came to choose between the Regent Council's oppression and genuine freedom, the choice would be obvious. They talked through the night, planning and debating and refining their vision of what this confederation of free worlds might look like. By morning, they had the outline of a plan that was both more ambitious and more hopeful than anything any of them had imagined when the conversation began. Aldrich would indeed lead a shadow government, but not one dedicated to retaking the Kalari Empire. Instead, he would work to build a new kind of political entity, one that proved that democracy and freedom were not just idealistic dreams but practical realities. The work would be slow and difficult, requiring careful diplomacy with the independent worlds and patient demonstration that their ideas could work in practice. There would still be danger, still be sacrifice, still be the risk that Prince Vex would discover their activities and move to stop them. But for the first time since their escape from Nexus Station, Marcus could see a path forward that offered hope rather than just survival. As Lord Commander Velkarim prepared to depart with their preliminary agreements and plans, she turned to Marcus with a question that surprised him. Mr. Chun, would you consider serving as an advisor to this new confederation? Your insights into practical governance and your understanding of how different cultures can work together would be invaluable. Marcus looked around at the family he had acquired through their shared exile, people who had trusted him with their lives and their futures. I'm just a mechanic, he said. I fix broken things. Yes, Aldrich said, smiling for the first time in months. And right now, our entire corner of the galaxy is broken. We could use someone who knows how to make things work again. Outside the cottage, the suns of Haven's Rest were rising over the purple mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was a new day, literally and figuratively, and Marcus Chun found himself looking forward to the work ahead. After all, some things were worth fixing, regardless of how complicated they might be. 5 years had transformed not just the lives of the refugees from Kalari space, but the entire political landscape of the galaxy's outer rim territories. What had begun as a desperate escape from tyranny had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. A functioning democratic confederation that proved freedom and cooperation could coexist on an interstellar scale. The Free Worlds Confederation now encompassed 47 star systems, each retaining its local autonomy while participating in collective decisions about trade, defense, and mutual aid. The capital, if it could be called that, remained on Haven's Rest, chosen specifically because it had no imperial ambitions and no desire to dominate its neighbors. Marcus Chun stood on the observation deck of the Confederation's modest headquarters, watching as delegates from a dozen different worlds concluded another session of the Confederate Assembly. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the ships that had brought them here. Everything from sleek diplomatic vessels to converted cargo haulers that spoke of worlds still building their prosperity from the ground up. Lost in thought, Zara asked, joining him at the window. At 17, she had grown into a remarkable young woman who combined her father's political acumen with an engineer's practical approach to problem solving. She had just finished presenting the Confederation's latest technological initiatives to the Assembly, proposing a network of shared research facilities that would allow member worlds to pool their scientific resources. Just reflecting on how we got here, Marcus replied. 5 years ago, you were a kid with a broken toy bird. Now you're designing the future of interstellar civilization. Zara smiled, but Marcus could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes. Being the daughter of the Confederation's founding leader had placed enormous expectations on her shoulders, expectations she had met with grace and intelligence beyond her years. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had never met you, she said quietly. If that bird had stayed broken, you would have found another way, Marcus said with certainty. Broken things want to be fixed. They find a way. Through the speakers in the observation deck came the voice of the Assembly's moderator, announcing the day's final vote. The measure under consideration was one that Marcus had helped draft, a proposal to offer membership in the Confederation to any world willing to meet the basic requirements of democratic governance and respect for individual rights. It was a radical departure from the way galactic politics had always operated. Instead of conquest or coercion, the Free Worlds Confederation grew through voluntary association and mutual attraction. Worlds that were tired of corrupt governors, oppressive taxation, and arbitrary rule could choose to join a community that offered real self-determination. The vote was unanimous in favor. 48 worlds, Zara said, checking her data pad as the newest member was formally welcomed into the Confederation. Papa will be pleased. Aldrich Vel Thorin, now known simply as First Speaker Aldrich, had exceeded everyone's expectations in his role as the Confederation's leader. Rather than ruling by decree or traditional authority, he had worked tirelessly to build consensus and demonstrate that democratic leadership could be both effective and responsive to the people's needs. His greatest achievement was not the power he wielded, but the power he had deliberately given away. Where is your father today? Marcus asked. Visiting the industrial cooperatives on New Geneva, Zara replied. They're having some problems with production quotas, and he wanted to see the situation firsthand before the Assembly votes on their resource allocation request. This was typical of Aldrich's hands-on leadership style. Instead of making decisions from a distance based on reports and statistics, he insisted on seeing problems for himself and talking directly to the people affected by Confederation policies. It was time-consuming and sometimes inefficient, but it ensured that the government remained connected to the realities of ordinary people's lives. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message, and Zara activated her personal communicator. Marcus watched her expression change from relaxed interest to sharp concern as she listened to the transmission. "What is it?" he